Hello, my jelly platters. My name is Jim, and this is your daily Brogue for the 18th of September 2021. I am currently hydrating so that I can take my run. I am in the American South. It is 27 degrees at 6:30 in the morning. That's 27 degrees Celsius. More like, I don't know, 82, 83 Fahrenheit. It's always hotter in Fahrenheit. That means I have to drink a pitcher of water before I go for a run. Actually, I don't need to drink quite that much, but I do anyway. There we go. When I get back, I will do work and things like that. When I do that work, I will listen to a lecture on YouTube about the grandfather paradox. So, sounds like this is going to be, I don't know how recent it is. It's from the Santa Fe Institute. Could be quite old. Let me check the other computer. It is 7 years old. So it's the grandfather paradox and quantum computing put together. So the idea will be to do this whole grandfather paradox thing. And learn something about it from one step too late. From quantum information theory. And I wonder how that's going to work out. So, what is the grandfather paradox, you ask? So, this is why I don't think there's much to it. Grandfather paradox is basically saying you can't have time travel, because if you could have time travel, you could go back in time, right? And then kill your own grandfather, and then you couldn't exist. You know, kill your own grandfather before he gave birth, or before he sired your father. Then you couldn't exist. And then there's therefore a paradox, right? But this is, okay, that's weird. This is very much a logical paradox, not a physical paradox, in my view, right? Now, there are various reasons why, or different ways you can have this paradox show up. One is usually, and what he's probably going to talk about is sort of signaling. What he'd say is, oops, set myself on fire. Again. There's some scaling up. Oh, okay. Out of depth goblin. It's going to be one of those days. So, let's see, how can we get this kind of 12, probably don't want to, let's try, maybe someone here, there's a strength potion, So one way you can end up with the information paradox suitable for for this is the information flows backwards, or the information doesn't have to really go backwards in time in its own view, right? But you got tachyonic matter, it's going faster than light. You can set up a system that will look like it's, there we go. Go ahead and try to erase here. And set up a system of 3 signals where the initial point, where you set up a loop basically in space-time. Even though in their own systems everything seems to be going forward in time. In reality, you know, observed from afar, let's say, not in reality. It looks like they're going, you end up with a, in reality you end up with a loop in space-time, a loop of information, right? So if you can do this, you can set up streams of the same particles, and you could send a message, for example, like a telegraph message, using these tachyons. So we can have something like that happen, assuming we have something like, you know, tachyonic matter, which is a stretch, I agree, but apparently you can find some sort of physical way to do this. Another way that might not be as unphysical is that you can have closed time-like curves, right? You can have, in general relativity, it is possible to have, what I just said is a closed time-like curve. That is, it is possible to have a null geodesic or even a time-like geodesic. That loops in on itself. This is not something that's really common, right? It's pretty exotic as far as possibilities are concerned, but it's something that is sort of technically possible. And so being something that's technically possible, it's something that people will investigate. Okay? How truly meaningful it is, I don't know. People try to find ways to say that this can't happen, but they never seem to really work out. They're always a little bit off. But as I said, I've never been particularly convinced by the idea that the grandfather paradox shows that you cannot have a this or that. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is that you're worried about. It doesn't seem to me that the grandfather paradox fixes it for you. Okay. Grandfather paradox, in my view at least, is a logical paradox, right? And it has nothing to do with physics. Furthermore, I'm not sure how logical it is. So, in a way, the grandfather paradox requires that malevolent energy disperses. Just in case I end up with something good. Just end up with a potion of something or other. Okay, throw the darts that were so costly there, and we'll let that burn. So burning? No. Another good armor. I've been wearing Q for a while and I haven't figured out what it is. So we'll use this one. That's enchanting. Armor of reprisal. What does that tell us about the armor? Okay, so we have +3 splint mail of we don't know what. And lots of leather armor. Or lots of leather armor and lots of enchantments. So now Useless secret drawer. Alright, so are there any reasons to suspect that crap? There we go. So, yeah, there are reasons to suspect that the grandfather paradox doesn't work out. Well, I could have bypassed the vampire bats. Ish, yeah. Because of this, I didn't notice the bridge. Bad brain. Normal reprisal doesn't work very well, at least not against vampire bats that are healing when they hit you. No really good weapons to use. No strength. That probably should have boosted up that rapier. Other than going all the way up with the reprisal. Boosting that rapier up by 2 so that I had the right strength was probably a better idea. Just to get it to normally working, but I always had this idea that I'm going to find strength potions and actual working weapons, actual good weapons in the dungeon. That doesn't always happen. So is there any reason to believe that something like the grandfather paradox does happen? Well, yes, right. Remember where an electron is just, or a positron is just a time reversed electron. That's an old Feynman idea. You switch your time direction for the electron. You have to switch its charge and its parity, so it goes from left-handed to right-handed, and it goes from negative to positive charge, so you end up with a positron. so a positron looks exactly like a electron going backwards in time. So when you have that going on, and you have vacuum fluctuations, that is, every once in a while, you have an electron-positron pair being created out of nothing. The most common thing to happen when you have two charged objects that appear out of nowhere is going in the opposite direction, is that their electric charges attract each other, they come back and they annihilate. So in quantum electrodynamics, this is something that you have to account for, and it's a fairly low level loop. I mean, it's not the lowest level, but it's still a fairly low level loop. So that sort of fluctuation is happening all the time in space-time. So I don't know if it's the best interpretation of what's going on, but you can look at that as a closed causal loop. You can look at that as a violation of the grandfather paradox, because if you just follow the electron up and then the positron down, you just end up with the same thing going on in a little loop, and then you can make more complicated versions of that have more interesting signaling, where something goes forward in time and something else goes backwards in time, and it's not the same thing, but you can build up more complicated versions of that, and that happens in quantum electrodynamics. So quantum theory says there's something like that going on, quantum field theory. Now this guy's going to give an information theoretical approach. It's probably going to say something where this paradox is fundamental. I do not believe that, but a lot of people seem to think it's very important. Some people seem to think that grandfather paradox is meaningful. I think it's only meaningful if you, well, believe in free will, right? That's the thing that's making this grandfather paradox seem like a paradox, is that you killed your grandfather, right? And there are a lot of issues with that, and I think the biggest one is that, I think for anything that's likely to be able to let you go back in time, it's not a small region that goes back in time. It's not like a tiny little bubble in space-time that could travel backwards in time or faster than light or something like that. Space-time has to be continuous, right? Space-time is continuous and differentiable and all sorts of these things, right? So, smooth and continuous, differentiable more or less, smooth and continuous. So there aren't any breaks in space-time. Big chunks of space-time could go. Big chunks of space-time have to have the properties that allow you to go backwards in space. So if you had, or backwards in time, so if you had something that lets you do that, then there wouldn't be any chance of something like a grandfather paradox happening just because of the scale involved. Okay, bye now.